Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Data Standard Audio Experience. Today we have Nandan Thor, the Director of Data Science from Palo Alto Networks. And today we're going to be speaking more about AI modeling and data science in general. So, welcome to the show, and I'm so excited to speak with you today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate you guys having me on and equally as excited.
Definitely. Can we just go ahead and get started with introduce yourself? Tell us more about what you do and the experiences you've had.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a director of data science at Palo Alto Networks, which is the global cybersecurity leader. So it's a huge tech company, close to about 10,000 employees now. And I run one of the data science teams there. We technically sit within marketing, but we work very cross-functionally with IT, with sales, with supply chain, with customer support, really the entire company. So what I do at Palo Alto Networks is I work on these really large, some people would call them moonshot projects, where we take existing ideas or existing concepts and we apply data to them. So for instance, we work on things like recommender systems, we work with graph theory, we do a lot of NLP, we do a lot of deep learning, which is pretty uncommon for marketing teams. So yeah, let me speak a little bit about how I got here, my background, because it's certainly not linear. So I graduated from UC Berkeley with a degree in cognitive science in 2014. And that degree really laid the foundations, the theoretical underpinnings behind data science and why certain algorithms work, why certain algorithms only work in certain contexts. And using that knowledge, I took a job as a biomedical engineer for a year, where I worked at a company that creates wireless EEGs using Bluetooth. So you're actually able to monitor brain activity in a non-tethered way. So you could look at athletes and people like that. So then I went back to grad school after doing that for a year. I got my master's in industrial engineering and my MBA. I went to Cal Poly for that. And as part of the master's in industrial engineering, you have to do a master's thesis. So I used computer vision to build a predictive model of fruit shelf life, specifically bananas. So essentially you're able to determine how long a banana lasts in a store, and then you're able to reduce food waste by selling bananas that will expire soon. You're able to sell those locally, whereas ones that have a long shelf life you could sell nationally. And if this were implemented, you'd be able to save tens of millions of dollars in food waste. And using that computer vision knowledge, then I went and I worked for a self-driving car company where we were really on the forefront of algorithm development for autonomous vehicles. And that was really cool. We actually had 3 patents granted there. And then, that leads me to Palo Alto Networks. One of the alumni from the Cal Poly MBA program brought me on to Palo Alto Networks. And I've been there for about 3.5 years now.
Yeah, that's so awesome. I've never heard data science being able to optimize grocery stores with food shelf life. So I think that's super interesting. Your banana example that you have brought up. I've never heard of it used in that context before. So super cool. Also with autonomous vehicles, I know that's huge in the industry right now. People are all trying to get into electric vehicles and making it more data driven, AI driven. So that's awesome. And so I wanted to hear more about your role with, you talked about how you're more in the marketing niche, but you also work a lot with data science as well as the intersection. And so what are some ways that data science applies to optimizing marketing side of things for you right now?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think it's becoming a much more relevant question every day as companies realize that they absolutely need to be using data and specifically data science in their everyday decision making. So I think most companies will use data and data science for generally simple things in marketing. For instance, building out target account lists or simple propensity models, lead scoring, things like that. But what sets the best companies apart from the rest would be how sophisticated they are with data and data science. So for instance, we do things like instead of building a large list of target accounts and telling sales reps or marketers or whoever to just go after them, we do it in a much more sophisticated way where we use deep learning, and we're actually able to figure out who in these accounts you should target and in which order you should target them, and also the relative importance of those people. So you can imagine how much more valuable that is if you're in the field doing marketing or doing sales to not only be told you need to target company X, but to be told you should first speak to person Y in company X, and then to person A, and then to person B. So you're able to be much more sophisticated around targeting, as well as really just anything in marketing. So some other examples of that would be we've built our own in-house recommender system on the website. So using NLP and deep learning and all these fun things, we're able to really maximize the amount of time people spend on the website. And in this day and age, that is very much the gold standard of marketing, is how much engagement on a website you can get. So it's really cool that as a company, we've been able to really dive headfirst into data, embrace data science, and build out these really cool things. And I think that the more that a company is able to really invest in data quality, data science, data engineering, you see, and companies are really starting to see this huge benefit, these huge returns just by investing in data. And so I gave the example of how we're more specific with targeting. We also, and with recommender systems, we also do things around more advanced return on investment. So instead of just saying, I have an ROI of 20x, so if I put in $1 million, I'm going to get out 20 million. We model in things like diminishing returns in order to just be more sophisticated around it and to provide much more relevant and actionable examples. So as I sort of mentioned at the beginning, I think data and data science is becoming way more important. And what really separates the great companies from the good companies is how much they're willing to dive in and embrace it. And we're already seeing these massive returns for people and for companies who are able to really invest in data and data science.
Definitely. And I have a question just as a follow-up for this. So I know that you said that you're more on the marketing side, and so you work with different data scientists and the engineering teams to make this all happen. So I'm assuming that you're the person that also directly reaches out to the clients and the customers to see what they're interested in, whether it be the product or the service. Are you also doing some of the programming, or are you kind of letting the data scientists and engineers know, hey, this is probably what we should do? You go program, I'll talk to the clients, or how does that kind of work?
Yeah, that's a great question. And in my mind, we can generally break up things into one of two categories, one of which is technical and one of which is business or sort of product management. And at least for my team and the people around me, we don't hire managers or directors or VPs or whoever just to do management. There always needs to be the element of somebody being able to jump in and do the technical thing if they need to. It's not always the case that leadership has to jump in and does things. And often a lot of the leaders here don't, they're not sitting there coding or sitting there building data pipelines. Often they'll be doing more of the business, the product management side of things, prioritization of projects, things like that. But for me specifically, I make sure to spend at least 10% of my time doing technical things for the simple reason that I enjoy doing them, right? So I think it's different for each team, and I can only speak for my own team. But for us, all of the leaders started in data science in a technical role and have slowly moved up into management.
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, I was just curious about kind of the balance between that, since marketing, I think traditionally has been more about talking to the client. So it's interesting hearing it being really meshed and intertwined with the data side of everything. So
Yeah.
interesting to hear that. Yeah. And so I want to hear more about explainable AI. You had mentioned this to me in a previous conversation. So how does explainable AI play a role in the output of an overall model?
Yeah, again, a great question. I think explainable AI is kind of this new hot field. There's some really cool techniques out there like LIME and Anchor, and an older technique like Shapley values. But basically, when I speak about explainable AI, the way that I think about it is, what is the reason that a specific example or a specific instance was classified in a certain way? And traditionally, the way people do this is with feature importance of models. But that's a really generalized thing. And it's often the case that if I go to a sales rep and I built them a product propensity model and I tell them, hey, it turns out account X is super likely to buy product Y. the number one question that always that 100% of the time gets asked is why, right? So they want to know, marketers, sales reps, whoever the end user of these models are, they always want to know what's the reason why this certain instance was classified in this way. And like I said, you could do it with feature importance, but often it's not the case that this specific instance is classified in a way because of the overall model's feature importance. So you build this sort of data science on top of the data science, where we look at why a certain instance of a model was classified in a certain way. And this is the number one thing that allows people to buy into models, because if I'm a sales rep or I'm a marketer and I am responsible for 10 accounts, I know those accounts really well. And if I'm able to use my own intuitive knowledge about these accounts, as well as the data science aspect of it, and those two actually make sense, then it's a really powerful partnership. And honestly, to the point that I would sacrifice quite a bit of accuracy for explainability, just because I'd rather have a less accurate model that is used widely as opposed to a 99.9% accurate model that nobody uses, right? So I think as a field of data science, we're really moving into explainability, interpretability, instead of just trying to optimize accuracy to the point that it's almost unusable. So yeah, I think explainable AI, and I'll call out the models again, things like line, anchor, Shapley values, those are unbelievably important to the point that I personally wouldn't consider a model complete without those in there.
Yeah, great insight there. It's definitely important to understand that end goal of the overall company to be able to know what output you really want as your result for your model too.
Exactly.
I know that a lot of people on the podcast have also told me that it's important to not overcomplicate the model if it's not necessary, because sometimes a simple linear regression is just enough, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, great insight there. And so I want to talk more about success now. So success is different for every company and every person, whether it be the type of role that you want to work in, the end goal that we want. There's just all different types of definitions for success. And so how did you go from an associate data scientist to a director of data science in 3 years? Because this is for you how you define success. So how was your journey like?
Yeah, that's again an excellent question. And I want to make sure to point out that I think success is a very subjective thing. And often people try to tie success to things like titles or money or whatever it may be. And I strongly disagree with that. I think, define it however you want. I consider it more things like happiness, work-life balance, things like that. So let me start by saying that. But I think in terms of what's worked for me in my career, I can speak a little bit about that. So I think the first thing is always if I look back on the last 3 years with a more like leadership management hat on, I think there's always in the back of a leader's mind, there's always the idea of ROI. So return on investment. And of course that means if I put in a certain amount of dollars, what's the return? But you can think about that in so many different ways. If I put in a certain amount of work, what's the return? If I put in a certain amount of effort, what's the return? So if you think about it as ROI, there's a few ways to sort of optimize that, right? And I know that this is getting kind of nerdy with ROI and stuff, but bear with me. I think one of the main keys to climbing up the corporate ladder is optimizing the ROI for yourself. So you only have a certain amount of hours in a day, and you want to produce the highest amount of business value while putting in the least amount of work hours. And for that reason, I think what's super important is being able to look at things that already exist and find new applications for them or find further business value for them. And I think that because if you go back to the ROI thing, you have basically no investment and a huge amount of return if you're able to take a model or a dashboard or whatever and apply it to a new business or to a new use case. So being creative with being creative with already existing projects is, I think, probably the main reason why I was able to move up in the corporate world. And I think that that is why diversity is so important at a company. So when I say diversity, I mean diversity of thought, diversity of experience, diversity of critical thinking, diversity of everything. And that's why whenever I speak to leaders in Silicon Valley, the first thing I will start with is we need to hire for diversity, not just because of whatever's happening in the world, but because it's actually a huge benefit to the company to be thinking about things, to have diversity of thought, diversity of experience. That's how you, to go back to the analogy, that's how you maximize the ROI, right? Um, if you're able to take something that exists and think about it differently. So I'd say that's number one for me. I think you need to constantly also be changing. You need to constantly be thinking about where is the company today and how does my role fit into it? Where is the company going to be? How do I see the company in 6 months, in a year, in 5 years? And would my role in the company in 5 years, would it be different? Do I need to change what I'm doing now to get ahead of that? So you always need to be thinking about business value and thinking about, how am I able to maximize business value and how am I able to really get ahead of where the business is going and ensure that I'm helping the business to achieve the goals. And the final thing I'll say about that is I think it's super important to always raise your hand and volunteer for things. And I don't mean that in the sense of working 24 hours a day. I mean that more in the sense of, especially when nobody wants to do something, raise your hand and do it. Best case scenario, you work on a project that you've never worked on before and you learn these awesome new skills and you're able to deliver a successful project. Worst case scenario, the project fails, but at least I'm sure you learned some things. So I think, again, one of the really important things is don't shy away from things just because it doesn't specifically match your title. Always be trying to learn new things and always just have a good attitude about it. If nobody else really wants to do something, try it out. And who knows, more often than not, you'll be successful with it.
Yeah, I really like that. I think it's important for people to kind of get outside of their comfort zone and try things that are new because you never know if it's something that you actually enjoy doing until you actually do it. So I think that's actually great advice for people trying to climb that corporate ladder, definitely. And so I wanted to also talk more about any additional advice that you have for anyone that's trying to go into the data science field or even the marketing field right now. Any advice that you have to offer there?
Yeah. So if I look at where I personally think the industry is going, I think that the actual technical aspect of data science is able to be automated more and more. And there's some really amazing platforms out there that you just throw in a data set and they'll do all the feature engineering for you. They'll figure out what the target variable is. And they're just going to go through 100 different models, tune the hyperparameters, and then get you the model that produces the best output based on what you're input. They're doing a great job with that. And because the cost of computing is so cheap now, that's always where the industry was going to go. And that's where it's going to continue to go. What you can't automate is things like business knowledge and understanding that if you're able to figure out how a function in a business works, whether that's marketing, sales, IT, supply chain, human resources, whatever it may be, if you're able to actually figure out what goes on at a company when they say marketing. And then once you're able to figure that out, then think about how would a data science model fit into this as well? How would it provide value? How would it make things more efficient? You're never going to find a platform that's going to do that for you, right? Like that is 100% career security if you can actually figure out how data science is used within a company. And then once you're able to figure that out and then figure out how data science actually works in a company, I think that's the gold standard for me as somebody who hires people. And we generally hire people that fall into one of two buckets. One is which they're really strong technically and they don't have much business knowledge. The other is which they have great business knowledge and they're not that strong technically. And we found that the people who are overwhelmingly successful are the ones that have business knowledge and we teach them technical skills, or we just give them a platform that sort of makes the technical skills obsolete. So yeah, once you're able to figure out how data science works in a business, my advice to any of the students or people who are trying to break into the field is then start doing projects within that function of the business. So if you're interested in sales, go out and there's so many data sets out there. Go out and build a lead scoring model or build something that helps sales rep efficiency or productivity or whatever it may be. And then probably the most important part of the project is think about how you define success there. And I don't mean accuracy or F-score or whatever. I mean, how would you sell this to a business user? Would it be that if we implement this model, we're able to get a dollar savings of this much, or we're able to get a workforce efficiency of this much? And just, you don't need to be accurate about it, but just be thinking about things like that. Because as a leader at a company, I always want people to be doing projects that provide business value and not projects to do projects for fun, right? We constantly need to be providing business value. So if you can understand the business, understand how data science fits into the business, and then finally understand the output of the model, then I think you have everything covered. So try to practice things like that.
Yeah, definitely. Great advice for those trying to get into the industry for sure. And we appreciate your time so much, Nandan. Thank you so much for joining us. Where can everyone find you online to connect with you?
Yeah, well, thanks again for having me. It's really been a joy speaking to you. I did watch that Social Dilemma movie, so I ended up deleting all of my social media, but I am on LinkedIn. So by all means, you're welcome to look me up, add me, and I'm happy to continue the conversation with whoever is interested.
Awesome. And to our audience, for more information on the data standard, you can find us at www.datastandard.io, as well as our YouTube and LinkedIn page. And this episode is sponsored by Pandio. They're innovating the tech space with their Apache Pulsar messaging system. So you can learn more about their work at pandio.com. And thank you so much, Nandan, for joining us. So great speaking with you and hearing more about the intersection between data science and marketing. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. It was really a joy.